Well, good afternoon and welcome to my garden. This is David Wilson, and welcome also to our Overdivest Nurseries YouTube channel. It's a pleasure to have you join us today. And if you're a returning subscriber, welcome back. But if you haven't yet subscribed to our channel, can I ask you to think about subscribing? Because once you're subscribed, you'll find that every time that we publish a new video, which we're doing all the time, you'll find it turn up automatically in your feed. And when you're watching the videos, if you find anything there that's helpful and interesting and you think would be worth sharing with your friends, that would be very nice if you'd do it too. And please hit the like button, because then that helps other people to find the information as well. Now, today is the Mother's Day week. This is the time of year when our gardens really come alive with lots of colour, fragrance in the air, birds chirping in the trees, and yes, lawnmowers out whirring in the background too. Lots of really nice things happening at this time of year. And of course, as you scan through the garden and look at all the plants that are featuring now at this time of year, one of the plants that very definitely catches your eye are the lilacs. When you see them in a garden like this and you smell the fragrance in the air and admire the colour, you realize just what fantastic plants they are. And if you can hear me over the whirring sound of the air conditioner, I'll tell you that this is a bloomerang lilac that we probably planted here about 7, 8, perhaps even 10 years ago. I lose track of time. But one of the interesting things about this variety is, after all that time, as you see, it hasn't grown much more than about 4 or 5 foot or so. And every year now at this time of year in mid-spring, it's absolutely covered with lots of these gorgeous flowers. And what's more, they come back to flower again in late summer and in the fall. And then elsewhere in the garden, we have some beautiful plants of probably one of the most reliable varieties that we have here in the garden, and that's Syringa miskim. And we think so much of it that we actually have 2 plants here in the garden. It's a little later flowering than the bloomerang, but man, when this comes out, is an excellent performer, one that does well year in and year out without a whole lot of care and attention. And one of the things I should say right off the bat, and that is that these plants are incredibly hardy. These are zone 3, would you believe, which means that they'll grow anywhere easily in our region. And to grow them in a garden situation, all they want is an average garden soil that's free draining. Good drainage is important. They just won't do in a wet, soggy place. Give them average, good draining conditions, and you'll find that they'll establish and grow away very well. Then look for a sunny spot. Somewhere that gets about 6 hours or more is ideal. They will grow in a partially shaded site, but they won't flower quite as profusely as they will when they're out in an open situation like this with lots of sunlight. Now, when you're visiting some of our partnering garden centers here in this region, that's the mid-Atlantic and northeastern states of the US, you're certainly likely to encounter some of these forms, ones that we generally call the dwarf lilacs. Now, as you go in, you're also probably going to find some of what they call the old-fashioned lilacs, or sometimes known as the French or common lilacs. There's some growing over here that were absolutely glorious about a week or 10 days ago. This one is a new selection called a New Age White, raised by Rick Grazzini, and it is very beautiful with that lovely nostalgic fragrance that takes us right back to our childhood with our grandparents, or perhaps our parents' gardens, or even just visiting somebody who'd cut some blooms and put them in a vase of water. Lovely, lovely fragrance. And incidentally, if you want to find out more about any of these individual varieties, I'd encourage you to take a look through our channel here, because over the years we've posted various videos focusing on them and telling you more about them. But one of the ones that I wanted you to know about is this gorgeous variety here, because this is probably one of my favorites and probably one of our nursery's co-workers' favorites too. This is Syringa Red Pixie. It's an absolutely fantastic variety, one that I think I've probably had growing here for almost 20 years. 20 years of pleasure and enjoyment out of growing a plant. That can't be bad. One of the interesting things about this plant is that it occurred in 1954 in a lilac collection, Meadowlark Lilacs, in Nebraska. Max and Darlene Peterson ran that wonderful collection, one of the best collections of lilacs in the world. And Max noticed a little seedling turn up, and he called it Red Pixie, because the buds, when they come out on this plant fest, come out with a reddish color. And he used to joke with his friends about his Pixie, his dwarf, slow growing, compact growing lilacs. He used to call them his pixies. So when this little seedling came out, even though the flowers, as you see, are now a beautiful shade of pink, it's got the name Red Pixie. But boy, is this a good performer. And I take a lot of pleasure out of growing and having this in my garden every year. But you know, one of the things about growing lilacs in the garden is that they have sometimes a tendency to get a little woody, get a little leggy, and run out of steam. So to keep them nice and vigorous and healthy and very free flowering, there's a little trick that I wanted to tell you about, one that I employ regularly here in my garden. And if you have lilacs in your garden, I think you'll find that it will make them a little bit more beautiful too. Here's what I did with them. And like before, I like to put down a tarpaulin or something that I'm able to catch the prunings on. It makes the cleanup a little easier. And then with a good sharp pair of pruners, it's really just a matter of going in and trimming back these shoots by about 1/3. And so you can reach in here and cut back these branches, making a cut just above a bud or at a joint in the branches either. So you can take these back. Generally speaking, this will help to open up the plant. If when you're in here you come across any old diseased, dead, diseased or damaged wood, you can certainly thin that out as well. You're generally just reducing the size of the plant and making it so that then it will stimulate new growth that's going to break out and create then lots of young growth that's going to carry the flowers for next spring. As you see, some of these I'm taking back a little stronger than some of the others. That's because I like to have, with some of these weaker ones here and smaller shoots, I like to have a nice kind of general rounded shape, but also an informal shape. Sometimes when you see people going in and they prune the plants back all at the same height, that's okay, but in time you can build up inside the plant a network of congested branches, which is really not that good for the plant, because ultimately you might wind up with disease issues setting forward, because obviously when you get a lot of growth in close to the plant, you tend to get not much air movement in there, and when it gets moisture, that can lead to fungal problems. So as you see, I'm just working my way around the plant here, shortening back these branches. Now if you look at these shoots, you'll see that these are the ones that have now carried the flowers from last year. So there's lots of spent flower heads on here that are filled with seeds, and really That's the important thing. We don't need those. We want the young growth to break out. So these are the ones that we now remove and shorten back. Now, just so that you can follow along, you'll see on this shoot here where it's growing out here from inside the plant. It was pruned 1 year back where my pruners are right now, and then it's grown out. It was trimmed to there last year, and now it's growing out over the edge of the bed here. So I'm going to be fairly aggressive with this and prune it back to there, to a set of buds. And here's one. If you look at it, you'll see how these branches are crossing and how it's really getting a little congested there, in which case then I will shorten this back to there. Here's another very good example of crossing branches. I don't know if you can see this or not, but these branches are crossing here, so obviously that's not a good idea. So I'm going to shorten that back to here and remove that. And then this branch I'm going to take back to a set of buds, and then this one will be the same. All the time reducing the overall size of the plant and then stimulating plenty of growth from inside the plant that then is going to grow out this summer and set lots of these gorgeous flowers that will appear next spring. Now, I don't know if you can see it or not, but this particular branch here is dead. So that's doing nothing. So it has to come out. And so you can reach into the center of the plant and with the pruners remove this branch here. And here's an example of some of the dead growth that I was talking about. These branches have kind of died back over the years. They're doing nothing back here in the middle. All of this growth, as you see, is dead and brown and really doing nothing. So that has to come out. Here's another one that's in here. And then if I show you this shoot, which is growing up, a young healthy shoot, but look at this one. It's turning and going back into the center of the bush. So if I prune it back to there, you'll see that that will sprout out from there and then grow out and make a new healthy shoot, which will add to the overall shape of the plant. Now, as you can see, the idea is to really just shape it up a little bit, shorten back some of the growth so that then it stimulates lots of growth. And if you come across some older shoots that are hardier and woodier, then you might need to use one of these long handled pruners. They're really great because it means that you can get in and really take out some sizable branches that will help to keep the center of the plant open and nice and growthy. So it's now shaped up nicely. It's kind of round, informal, a natural shape, just the way I like it. It will certainly stimulate lots of growth that will come out from all these places I've pruned. But there's one more job that I really want to do, and that is that I want to do some renewal pruning. I want to try and encourage some shoots that are going to come from the center of the plant so that it helps to keep it nice and open, and also renewing branches. That helps to keep the plant in overall vigorous habit. And that's where pruners, or if you haven't too big of branches, you can go in with a pair of pruners too and you can take them out. But by reaching in, you can take out branches like this, which then opens up the center of the plant and encourages new growth that's going to come up through and keep the plant vigorous. If you do that and take out maybe about a quarter or so of these larger branches, that will certainly stimulate plenty of growth and keep the plant nice and vigorous for years to come. So in summary, you prune them as soon as possible after they finish flowering. That gives a maximum amount of time for them to grow out and set flower bud for next year. The first thing to do is to go in and remove the 3 Ds, the dead, damaged and diseased wood, and then reduce the overall growth by about 1/3 of the plant, but do that at different levels so that you're not just stimulating growth around the perimeter of the plant And when you remove some of the older stems from inside the plant, that will help to give you renewal pruning too, which will keep the plant extra vigorous, growing, and of course loaded with lots of flowers next spring. So there you are. Now you know what you can do to your dwarf Pixie lilacs to get them flowering and producing lots of young vigorous growth and putting on a show like this. It should be mentioned that you don't have to prune them each and every year. Every second or third year will be fine. Just as long as there's enough to keep that renewal, that vigorous growth coming through, that they produce lots of young, strong growth, be well furnished right to the ground, be healthy and vigorous, and of course flowering and producing lots of gorgeous fragrance. That's all we really want in our gardens, isn't it? So this is David Wilson. Enjoy your gardening. It's good for us, and it's very good for our environment too.